Open exchange. Francophone Africa, those are the countries that speak French rather than English, I suppose, has experienced significant growth over the past decade, like the rest of the continent. Notwithstanding the global volatility in the economy, the region is increasingly viewed as a dynamic and exciting region to do business in. Joined now by Sarah Warren, structured trade transactor at RMB in the studio, and on the line Victor Lopez, who's an economist for sub-Saharan Africa, the global markets at Standard Chartered Bank. Let's start with you in Johannesburg, Sarah. The Francophone Africa, it identifies an issue. It says this is a language issue. How important is this language issue?
I think it has been a deterrent to people wanting to look at the region. So, I mean, there is that language barrier and that turns investors away. However, I think, over the past, a couple of decades, there's more, training in English. A lot of the business people that you'll deal with can communicate in at least two business languages, French and English, or if they don't, they have an associate who can. So I don't think that's an obstacle that can't be overcome. But I mean, it obviously is something that needs to be taken into consideration when you're looking at going into that region.
Victor, what's your understanding of investors who should know better simply turning away because they don't know the language?
No, I don't believe that language can be an issue. I mean, Francophone Africa is just too important to be ignored. And actually, just a few numbers. For example, the CFA franc zone comprises 14 countries, so it represents around 15% of Africa's GDP. Francophone Africa is 17% of the population of Africa. Some countries, like say Cote d'Ivoire or Cameroon, are among the top 10 largest economies in the continent. So really, Francophone Africa does matter. And actually, this is why, despite, as you mentioned, language barrier, I mean, Francophone Africa receives 20% of the foreign investment that is directed to Africa. So clearly, language is not an issue. What investors see is the potential of the region.
Sarah, just let's look at some of those countries that we think of in that group. Cameroon, DRC, Cote d'Ivoire, Guinea, Republic of Congo and Senegal. Are they a bloc, or are they each a different country where you've got to do different things?
I mean, although they're grouped together, if you actually look at, what their primary source of income, who their primary trading partners are, that does differ between regions. So I don't think that you can automatically just see them as a bloc, although of course there are things that do group them together. For instance, the common currency that's pegged against the euro. Those kind of things would make people, view them as a region rather than looking at individual countries. But certainly in terms of, the different growth potential in each of those jurisdictions, you would be able to single those countries out.
Victor, France obviously would have pole position, having been the colonial power. And we've talked before about how trade by African countries, a lot of it is going to outside Africa rather than inside Africa, intra-African trade. So is France still the overwhelmingly dominant part, or a lot of other companies coming in? And one thinks of resource companies which are not French, for example.
Yeah, sure. I mean, there is still a quite significant French influence, I would say, in Francophone Africa, obviously. But this influence is really declining year by year. Most Francophone economies are now diversifying their trade. They are trading more and more with China, with India, with Brazil, the Middle East. Corporates from the emerging world are strongly competing with French corporates. So there is increasing competition for French companies, and their dominance is really not what it used to be in the past.
Yeah. Well, Victor, I'm going to say goodbye to you there. It's not a great connection from Dubai that we have on the line, so thanks to Victor Lopez for joining us there. Still in Johannesburg with Sarah Warren. Sarah, from a South African point of view, there's been a lot of talk of South African companies. All the company results that we've had recently, they talk about the South African operations and they talk about the growth that they're expecting in the continent of Africa, rest of Africa. So how are we in relation? Because it's the one group, if you think about it, we've got a big Greek community, we've got Portuguese community, Indian community, Chinese, a small but important community. British, of course, English and German. Spanish and French are the two that we really don't have. Very small community, so there's no kind of instinctive feel for this region here.
Yeah, I mean, that point taken, but I don't think that means that we don't view the area as a very important trading partner. And certainly over the last, 10 years or so, we have seen our exports and imports to that region improving over time.
What sort of sectors are we active in Francophone Africa, from South Africa?
From South Africa, I mean, it's primarily the resources companies, so the mining companies that are looking to the region, but certainly one area that is very exciting for South African companies is the commodities area. It's a region that has got a wealth of natural resources. So if you look at somewhere like Ivory Coast, they are the world's largest producer of cocoa. Oh. You also look at, so there's large potential there. Coffee, I know that there was a decline in prices in 2003, 2004. People are now starting to invest more in coffee in the region. So we have seen those prices improve, and a lot of those countries in the regions are investing in improving that. Cotton, again, we're seeing that there's increased cotton production out of the area. And then perhaps more exciting is something like palm oil. So palm oil has a range of applications. It's used in anything from soap to ice cream, and that production is certainly going up, and it's getting interest not only from within Africa, but also from external sources. So Malaysia, Indonesia, Singapore, all very interested, and I think that's the key. Is if people see some kind of growth potential in the region, which certainly exists. There will be, funds flowing into the region, and that can improve the infrastructure. Because, I mean, that is one of the key obstacles to the growth in the area.
I was going to say, there are cultural issues. I read something somewhere that there's what they call a chief culture in the French-speaking country. The boss must have all the answers, whereas South Africa is more of a team player. But infrastructure and things like that, that's just, I suppose, it depends on the country. It's not whether they speak French or not. Or are they better at infrastructure than the former British colonies?
I don't believe so. I think, that region is, if you look at some of the reports that are coming out, they're in the most desperate need of funding for infrastructure projects. So, if you look at the cost of actually getting a product to market coming from that region, although they can produce a range of commodities, actually the cost of getting that product to the market perhaps makes it prohibitive to really expand their exports to the amount that it could really reach. So, we need to look at when companies invest into the country, they need to also invest in improving the infrastructure in country, perhaps partnering with a local firm. And if we're looking at the importance of inter-regional trade, well, that's well and good, and I think the opportunities exist. But really, if you don't have the infrastructure to move those goods between the region, you're really not going to come right. Particular to this region as well is the fact that they're more landlocked French-speaking African countries than English-speaking African countries. And you'd see the most dynamic growth countries really on the continent are coastal states. So that again is something that needs to be considered. You really need to invest into the roads and into the transport networks.
And sort out customs issues. I mean, a lot of these countries, there's blockages at the borders. Fascinating subject. We'll have to. Do you speak French, or are you learning it fast?
I don't. I'd like to, but unfortunately not.
Well, it sounds like a lot of us will have to start if we want to take these opportunities. Thanks to Sarah Warren, who's a structured trade transactor at RMB on the French-speaking countries.